Shopping malls are dying, say headline writers and my wife's cousin Chad. In 2007, 1 year before I left Britain for a new life in the US, no new mall was constructed in America for the first time in half a century. This was in stark contrast to the 90s when more than 100 popped up every year. For my younger viewers, physical shopping was so central to people's lives in the 90s that we let Jingle All the Way succeed at the box office. But the rise of online shopping, not to mention the COVID-19 pandemic, has seen some of these once bustling complexes turn into ghost malls. And I don't mean that your great-great-granddad haunts the Cheesecake Factory. I mean that the malls in question have a declining occupancy rate of 70% or less. In fact, I saw this grim reality play out in the very city to which I moved 16 years ago this week, Anderson, Indiana. Mounds Mall had displayed all the signs of terminal illness, including the fact that its most eye-catching feature was a photo booth. And since I left Britain, malls across the pond have faced similar challenges when it comes to attracting customers. And so, as somebody who's been a customer in both countries, I figured I'd compare British and American malls while they're still with us. But I can't do that without first addressing the fact that in Britain we don't usually call them malls. We call them shopping centres, or shopping precincts if we want to sound posh. Now that doesn't mean that Britain didn't have a huge say in the word's creation. You see, even though mall feels somehow American, Britain was the first to use it as a standalone word. It is indirectly derived from a 17th century Italian game called Palamaglio, or Pall Mall, the pronunciation of which can still be heard in London today, when locals pronounce the street name of the same name, Pall Mall. But the game, a precursor to croquet, was once played along this famous promenade, back before people could be sped up in post. It was from this fact that the promenade received the name that it goes by today, the human conveyor belt, but also the mall. This older definition of the word was also embraced by the United States, with the National Mall in DC having been named after the London one. And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, what has this got to do with shops? And I'll tell you if you'll just let me finish talking. Promenade malls reserved for pedestrians would usually be flanked by storefronts. So, after the first indoor shopping centres emerged in 1950s America, the definition of malls shifted as the retail landscape did likewise. Speaking of businesses, wouldn't it be nice if you had a place to keep track of all of your ingoings and your outgoings? Your e-commerce and project management portfolios. Basically, a place to house all of the information you need to run a successful business. Which is why you should check out today's sponsor, Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one solution for businesses like mine, which is just as well because even YouTube sensations like me have to take care of day-to-day operations. As we make our way through the literal business end of the year, it's good to know that I can keep track of my schedule using Odoo's planning app. This is going to make it so much easier to plan my Christmas content and still have time to buy presents on Christmas Eve. Furthermore, Odoo has a robust customer relationship management app, not to mention accounting, sales, and inventory management. For people like me who are motivated by a strong aesthetic, I love having all of these apps housed together in one visually appealing menu. Better yet, your first application is free for life. So click the link in the description to get started. Another major difference between British and American shopping centres is their location. You see, something that took me aback about Midwestern life, aside from billboards asking me if I'd found Jesus yet, was the degree to which US malls could be found far away from the town centre. Following the passage of the Interstate Highway Act in the US, the 1950s saw a big boom in car ownership. As more and more Americans moved from downtown and into the suburbs, property groups capitalised on this by building big shopping centres near suburbs and along highways. On the one hand, downtown retailers suffered. On the other, it was a boom period for graffiti artists. However, this specific issue is less applicable to Britain. Why? Because most UK shopping centres are located downtown, but there's still lots of graffiti. Anyway, growing up in the English town of Grimsby, I knew its shopping centre to be one such example. Completed in 1971, Freshney Place Shopping Centre was a sort of central hub where I'd bump into friends and pocket thieves. And because all bus routes led to Grimsby Town Centre, access to the mall, if you will, did not require a driving licence. Now, as I speak, Uncle Toby is probably typing, "Not all UK shopping centres are downtown. Ever heard of Meadowhall or Trafford Centre?" Well, firstly, those are surely more the exception than the rule. And secondly, as somebody who's been to both, here's how I got there. By bus, and by train, and by accident. Look, Meadowhall has its own train station. To which Uncle Toby will no doubt reply, so does Mall of America. What's your point? My point is that Britain is just more consistent around public transport. Yeah, I mean, some US malls are accessible by bus, but first of all, most Americans have neither the need nor the inclination to use them. And secondly, the buses in question differ wildly by frequency and availability and driver friendliness, but that's the same in Britain. Anyway, speaking of customer service, that brings us on to these. This video would be insanely rubbish if I didn't talk about the things for which malls are mostly known. The stores themselves, or shops as they're more widely known in Britain. Because teenagers are a key demographic, malls on either side of the pond usually have way too many clothing stores. From memory, H and or M is popular in both countries. However, Americans in Britain are just as unlikely to find an Old Navy as Brits in America are to find a Next. And the American discount store TJ Maxx was rebranded in Britain as TK Maxx to avoid confusion with the UK retailer TJ Hughes. Personally, after about 5 minutes in any of these, I'm usually ready for coffee. And while many UK shopping centres do have a Starbucks, America boasts only 6 Costa Coffees. That's the UK's #1 coffee chain. 5 of them are found in Atlanta for reasons that aren't quite clear. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that Costa Coffee, a British company, is owned by the Coca-Cola Company, which originated and is headquartered in, you guessed it, Atlanta. Actually, it is that. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Remember a few minutes ago when I said this? But the rise of online shopping, not to mention the COVID-19 pandemic, has seen some of these once bustling complexes turn into ghost malls. Well, one other contributing factor in the demise of malls is the demise of anchor stores. What's an anchor store, Lawrence? An anchor store, often a department store, is a larger retailer with broad appeal. Think Macy's in the United States or Marks & Spencer in the UK. Since my move to the United States, both countries have witnessed the total collapse of major anchor tenants, often to the detriment of the mall in which they're housed. For instance, in 2009, the UK said goodbye to Woolworths, a division of the American Woolworth Company that went under in 1997. As somebody who left Britain in the wake of the Great Recession, I felt this one personally, because Woolworths was where I did my Christmas shopping every December 24th. And after moving to the birthplace of the Great Recession, I encountered Americans feeling the same way about a department store called Sears. In fact, Mounds Mall from earlier in the video is home to the only Sears I ever visited, for it was here that I purchased a laptop tray to prevent my computer from overheating. Eventually, that Sears and later the mall itself went kaput, just like my laptop. It just goes to show that nothing in this world is too big to fail, which brings us on to this. When discussing all of this on my secret live stream, a patron rightly suggested, I'm quite sure that Britain has nothing like Mall of America, even Trafford Centre in Manchester. Given that Mall of America is easily the largest mall in the US, I took this to mean Britain has nothing close to its size. But if I'm wrong, and the comment actually meant that Trafford Centre doesn't have a sea life aquarium, it actually does. Anyway, since America does everything bigger is such a common refrain on this channel, I assumed that this extended to American malls in general. But unlike the Topshop logo, not everything is so black and white. First of all, America has a much higher concentration of strip malls, which surely brings down the average. Secondly, while America's 5 largest malls are all bigger than the UK's largest shopping centre, the UK's 3 largest would still make America's top 20. In other words, large shopping centres are justified in the UK, presumably because the country has more people per square mile than all but 4 US states. One of those states is New Jersey, home to American Dream Meadowlands, the 2nd largest mall in America. And what I discovered about American Dream, not to mention Trafford Centre, is that in 2024, they are thriving. But wait, you might say, isn't that the exact opposite of a ghost mall? Which leads me to ask, is my wife's cousin Chad mistaken? Are malls actually dying? Well, experts say that depends on their willingness to adapt. If these 16 years in America have taught me anything, it's that the only constant is change. Change to the thickness of my hair, change to the technology at our fingertips, or change to the people in power. Adapt or perish, wrote H.G. Wells. Now as ever is nature's inexorable imperative. And while he isn't here to speak for himself, Wells was definitely talking about malls. You see, American Dream recognized the need to introduce a water park because that experience cannot be replicated online, and also because not enough people were turning up to Best Buy in flippers. And speaking of staying afloat, thank you for subscribing to Lost in the Pond, and if you haven't yet subscribed, do that now. Until the next time, goodbye.